Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me returning guest David Whalen from Correct Handed Comics. So, welcome back.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you having me back. And I really
Yeah,
appreciate you having me on your birthday. Happy birthday.
so everybody, it's my birthday. This is what I do on my birthday. I'm 28. But I'm the one who should be honored here because I'm spending it with you, and that's how it's working here. So,
That's a powerful host right there. That's some powerful hosting you got going. Good job.
yeah, so I'm actually very excited because the entire purpose was actually to launch this on my birthday. I started 4 days early, so I'm sorry for the two people I had on today. You don't get that privilege anymore. But having said all that, you are a returning guest, and there's a lot going on with you lately. And we're going to be talking about two comics that are coming out relatively soon, but I kind of want to catch everybody up to speed on what Correct Handed Comics is, what comics you produce, for those who missed it, the last interview some odd months ago. So I think the best place to start is, what is Correct Handed Comics?
Yeah, so I started Correct Handed Comics a few years back, and it really just kind of stemmed from working in with small publishers and putting out. It was a lot of first issues. It was a lot of 8-pagers. It was a lot of anthology stuff, and really as an art teacher and being starting to really get confident with what I wanted to do as far as the stories I wanted to tell, started Correct Handed Comics and just started with one of the stories that I knew has had for 20 years that really wanted to start telling. So I started with an ongoing series called The Offspring. And issue 14 of The Offspring should, barring any problems in a weird time right now, should be out by the end of this month. So we've got 13 issues, almost 14 issues under our belt, and I couldn't be more happy with the story, with the way it's progressing, with the art, I've got a new colorer, Chris McCauley, who was starting with issue 14, who has worked with DC and Boom and Disney and Marvel, and is working with Bram Stoker's line of Dracula. Stuff that he's got going. So he's a really good colorist, and some of the pages he's bringing to me look amazing. So I can't wait for people to see that. We've got one shots of different genres. We have graphic novels, we have regular novels, and we have 4-issue miniseries up on our website. And I'm really just trying to quell all of the creative energy that I get pent up during a day by trying to get all these books and all these different stories out.
Yeah, so I want to break that down a little bit further because obviously The Offspring has 13 issues that are currently out. Issue 14 is coming out, and the basic premise is that 3 friends unite after years apart, and then they have powers, and then, well, it sort of goes out from there, and not everything is as it seems, and they discover people have other powers similar to them, and they're trying to help them out, and obviously it sort of goes from there. Yeah. So to dive a little bit more into it without ruining too much, so people get a feel for what The Offspring is. Where is The Offspring going? What is the basic premise? Because we spoke about this in more depth in our last interview, but for those who missed it, I kind of want them to get a sense of it.
Yeah, you did a good elevator pitch there. Issues 1 through 13 are essentially, I'm calling it season 1. To where we learn about their characters, and we learn about their powers. We learn about how they got their powers. And issue 13 ends with, on a pretty big scope of like universal proportion, where they meet these the gods that have been manipulating them since issue 1. So we get a couple questions answered in issue 13, but then all those other questions start to come up about why this is happening. So issue 14 really starts season 2. And I'm starting with a bang. I was super excited to get some time travel into The Offspring. So we start jumping, running right from the jump with some time travel stuff, and they get pulled into the Civil War. And they are separated out when they get to the Civil War. They have to come find each other, and it does not go well to begin with. So the first issue of the second season really changes up the status quo for them to be able to not only show these characters in a different light, but also move the story forward to be able to find a friend that has been missing that they didn't realize a friend was missing until probably issue 10 or 11, where it really started to, some of those little hints that I dropped started to become a little clearer. So they're essentially trying to find the fourth member of their group that is trapped in time. So issue 14 really starts to progress that story forward. And like I said, the pages that are coming out, the colors that are coming out from our colorists look amazing. I can't wait for people to see it.
And then we're going to just table that right there because I don't want to go and ruin that. I think it's collected in some trades at this point, and also the single issues.
Yeah, I have single issues. Yeah, single issues in volume 1, 2, and 3 are all up, and you can find links on our website, correcthandedcomics.com.
And to even go further, because I do want to catch everybody up to speed before we talk about the 2 one-shots that are coming out. Mm-hmm. You also have The Loved Ones, which I love that one, and we have children, sort of monster children being rescued, and maybe things aren't so what they seem, and then this guy is sort of raising them and protecting them, and it's this idea of nurture versus nature, and it sort of expands from that entire concept. And this is another one we went over, but obviously that is very different because that is a one-shot, but it's not your traditional one-shot, where it's almost a full graphic novel.
Yeah.
Complete story in many ways, and it's very different than The Offspring, where you're getting a complete story in one whole book.
Yeah, it's essentially my homage to the old classic black and white movie monsters of the past, the 30s and the 40s, and I'm the creator of the concept, but then the writer. Brian Menard from Dojo Kun Comics. Him and I got together. We met a few years back at some small press stuff, doing some small press stuff together. And I really wanted to reach out to an artist that I trusted, that I knew that I worked well with. And we started talking about this concept, this idea, and he gave me a script, and it was amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be. It took these 4 teenage-ish monsters and really made their humanity shine through. It made the reasoning for them to be hunting their parents really clear. And it's like I said, it's just a really fun read, and I think it ends in a way that fans will really like, and it opens it up for many more stories with these characters. The Loved Ones was definitely a labor of love to be able to get that 100+ page graphic novel out, and it's doing pretty good, and I've got a lot of positive feedback from it. So I can't wait for, if people haven't had a chance to check it out, go check it out. It's a good one. I really like it.
And I really enjoyed it as well. Just so everybody knows, I loved it. I'm not going to go ruin where it goes. It's just goes in a very different direction.
It gets a little nuts sometimes, doesn't it? It gets a little nuts.
It gets a little crazy.
It gets a little nuts. Yeah.
Direction, and it also raises questions when you go beyond the surface of it, where nature versus nurture, and that entire age-long debate that's been going on in most of humanity. And so,
are we who we are when we're born, or are we made to be that way by our surroundings? Is really the question. And like I said, it's not answered. We're not solving the world's problems or anything, but it is definitely a look into that idea.
It's going to make you think, and if you're interested in having something make you think that has a little bit more of a fantasy horror vibe, this is the book for you.
Yeah.
And so I also want to mention a mini series, and I'm going to probably get the name wrong, and you know which one I'm going to mention: Evolution Utero or Utaro.
Utero.
I knew I was going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I got it wrong last time. I'm going to get it wrong this time. And so this one,
like uterus, right?
Hey, I understand. I'm going to get most things wrong, so it's all right.
It's all right.
So this one is a one-shot, and obviously we're dealing with Jenny's adult life has been filled with bad decisions, and then, well, she gets pregnant, and she's about to have a super baby. And some people are in her corner, and some people are not. And obviously we go from there. And what I like about this is that it is 4 issues. They connect the covers. It's a one gigantic poster, which is super cool. And obviously we now explore what is it like to have a super baby on the way. And you can imagine what Superman's parents were feeling like when they were going to be giving birth to him. Yeah. So that's the other miniseries that I want to talk about and let people know, because obviously there's a bunch of stuff that's taking place in here that's also different from The Loved Ones and The Offspring as well.
Yeah, Evolution Utah was the first, and right now the only 4-issue miniseries that we have out. I have others in the works, but time is oftentimes not our friends in these situations. But Evolution Utero really started from me wanting to play with the superhero genre, and the idea that they always talk about Superman or Captain America being born to be a hero. They were born to be this. They were born to be that. So I thought, well, why don't we start talking about it before they're born? Why don't we see what would happen if if one of these superpower entities was knew about or was aware of their superpowers before they were even born. And the fun aspect of it is that the person that is doing the birthing, Jenny, is probably picture the worst person you'd ever meet, and she's that. She's very egotistical and very selfish. She does not care about learning or growing or helping other people. She only cares about herself. So it's that idea of having a hero inside of you and becoming aware of it fairly quickly in the pregnancy, and how she decides to deal with it. Is it going to change her in a positive way, or is it going to be the idea of her not being able to get out of her own way? And again, it's that idea of when I became a parent, I wanted to talk about how being a parent changes you, as a person. Usually, I can't speak for every parent, of course, that's ever been out there, but it changed me to be able to kind of look at myself a little bit more, and those decisions that I would have made 5 years, 10 years before becoming a parent, I definitely wouldn't have made after becoming a parent. So it really kind of plays with that idea of the responsibility that's thrust upon you. And in this case, the responsibility is even a million times more, because now the fetus, not even the baby yet, the fetus inside of her is starting to develop superpowers. And she has to deal with that also.
And yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well, because clearly this is dealing with something that we don't get from the DC, the Marvels of these characters coming into existence. And we don't really see also their influence. Mm-hmm. And I like science, and me and my friends have debates on, what are inherent traits, what are, learned traits. Yeah. And this is kind of dealing with some of that. And then Jenny doesn't really have superpowers. And so there's all these questions, and it's this idea that, okay, what happens to the person who's actually giving birth to the superhero and not the superhero themselves. And so many ways a prequel, and it's the definition of a prequel, and it's great, and I think it's very clever, the entire concept.
Thank you very much.
Not to mention the covers all connected, because that's a nice touch.
Yeah, those are fun to make. We having it in trade also. We were trying to really figure out different ways to be able to show the concept itself, to show the idea of the book, while also making cool covers. It was really fun to be able to put those together.
And then the last one I want to talk about, to catch everybody up, and then we're going to talk about new stuff, but I want everybody to get a sense of Correct-Handed Comics. Mm-hmm. And I'm missing a bunch of stuff too and other things in it, but let's talk about Shady Lady, because this is noir thriller. Obviously, it's about pretty much the average person's life, and things sometimes work out and things sometimes don't work out, and it's how you deal with it and all the trials and turmoils that take place. And obviously this is a one-shot dealing with Shady Lady, the character. So, and it's nice because it's a representation of the average person's life. And a lot of times in comics, we get sort of the above average person, and we get the person that we look up to. And it's nice to have that, but this is a comic that's sort of leveling in many ways. And in some people, and for some people, it might also be looking down a little bit at the same time. And so it's kind of a very interesting perspective to mix it up.
Yeah, definitely. Again, you nailed it. She is the main character, the Shady Lady. She's definitely not somebody that is someone that you would right off see as a leader. But as you go through the stories, which are really just kind of little vignettes that work together, very inspired by Twilight Zone. the original Twilight Zone series by Alfred Hitchcock. Like you said, those thriller noirs of the 30s and 40s, but put in a very contemporary way. I wanted to tell a story that kind of shined a light on some of the socio and political issues that were happening in our time today, but do it in a way that I thought would definitely show an everyday, like you said, an everyday person dealing with these issues. And you come to find out near the end, no spoilers, of course, you come to find out at the end why she is doing the things she's doing and how she's handling it, and why it all kind of comes to fruition at the end.
Yeah, and again, I think it's really interesting, this entire book. And I also like the fact that it's a one-shot, meaning that when you pick it up, it is a start from finish story, and we get a whole encompassed story in it. Yeah. So that's that. And now I want to drop all that and talk about the new stuff.
Okay.
Because this is why we're here, but I wanted to catch everybody up really quickly who's seeing this, so they get a sense of what Correct-Handed Comics is. Because it's not just what we're going to talk about that's coming out. And, well, this is a one-shot that I want to talk about, and it's called I Won't Stop. And so, obviously, this is really interesting, and pretty much we got a superhero who loses his parents and his wife pretty much in the same day. Yep. And then he's a superhero. He's super excited. His life is about to turn around. The hero's name is Spiral. And then from that day forward, he just hasn't stopped saving people, and he's getting questioned by his fellow superheroes, and he's not sleeping, and he basically is coming to the premise that any life I can save, I'm going to save today and not tomorrow. And people who challenge him or say, hey, slow down, take a break, he says, I'm leaving now, and he's very closed off. And so that's pretty much the premise of it. And so I'm really curious, where did this idea come from? Because we don't see this type of hero. And I'm not even too sure if he really is a hero at this point, because it's a little bit complicated where he's not a vigilante and he's not doing anything bad, but it's not a very hero, I guess, oriented trait.
Yeah, you could say that he's going through something, and it's clearly affected him mentally and physically. I wanted to try to stay away from, or shy away from, I guess, traditional superheroes, because they're being done by the big boys. I kind of wanted to, when I first started, I kind of said, I'm gonna not do flights and tights, unless I come up with something that I think is really different, and will be really an interesting kind of have a lot of character development for that Superman type character. So when I thought of this idea, I was thinking about the Spider-Man mythos and power and responsibility, and where does that responsibility end if you have that power, which is what Spider-Man deals with. Because you have that power, you have a responsibility to help people. But where does that end? Because Superman's talked about it too. Also, you can't save everybody. Superman can't save everybody. But then I kept thinking, but he doesn't really try. He's goofing off with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen a lot. You know what I mean? He's out there gallivanting around as a reporter when he could be saving people. So I wanted to think of a hero, and Spiral, the name of the hero, Spiral, kind of gives you an idea about where his character, where his feelings and emotions, physically and mentally, are going to go. So I thought, if Superman were to lose Lois Lane, were to lose his family, how would Superman react? And this character, the Spiral, he reacts by saying, no one else ever again is going to have to deal with this, is going to have to put up with this loss. So he spends, we see him through a span of years, saving everybody that he can. And he's confronted by a Justice League type group of characters, and they say, you can't do this. You're killing yourself. You think you're helping, but in the long run, this isn't going to help anybody. And he essentially says, well, it's helping people now, and if you aren't helping me, you're in the way. So get out, to leave, unless you're going to help me. And you're right. He's very closed off. very determined. In some cases, that's a good thing. But then, as the climax of the story, and in the end of it, we come to realize um, why sleep is a good thing, why rest is a good thing, why recharging your batteries to be able to use your cognitive and critical thinking skills is a good thing, because he makes a choice that he really doesn't even make. It's on instinct, that destroys him and who he is. And that's as far as I'm going to say about it.
There's a lot to break
Yeah.
down with this,
Yeah.
because I think this goes beyond just the 25 pages that are written. It's 25 or 26 pages
Yeah.
that are written. And we now get into the psyche of, well, superheroes are fragile beings in many ways. And so now we have a character that is extremely fragile. And the second he loses something, he sort of snaps.
Yeah.
And he sort of loses his mind. And then, he's still functioning as a hero, but it's this idea that he's doing his heroic duty and he's using his powers, but it's that nice balance where, okay, that you're not wanting anybody else who can't be saved to not be saved, but also it's like you're now crossing a line and more entering a Punisher realm, and almost even more of a rogue hero in many ways.
Yeah.
And so, and to convey that in 25 pages is very difficult, and I don't think people understand how complicated that is. And so
there was a lot more. Yeah, there was a lot more there. And that's it's a character that could have so much more story. And yeah, putting it to 25 pages was tricky. I think I did a really good job of succinctly telling the story and getting all the character beats and the plot beats, and being able to communicate with the character, and the idea that while he's trying to save humanity, he is losing his connection with it. So he's losing the thing that makes him the hero by trying to save and be a hero to everybody. And that's one of the things I wanted to kind of play around with. If I was going to do a superhero story, it wasn't going to be just Batman beats up Joker. It was going to be something that really played with the idea, the concept, the character of what this kind of hero is. And I think I did a pretty good job. I've gotten a lot of positive response from it, and I love it. And I love the design of Spiral, and it's quite possible that I would use him again.
And to even go further, because we get this discussion very much with Batman to some degree, and I think this is here as well, where you get the idea of selflessness versus selfishness, and being selfish. And it's this idea that he's trying, in the way I read it, and maybe you wrote it differently, and I'm sure some people might view it how I view it, and they're going to view it very differently, but he is trying to be selflessness. And trying to save everybody and prevent people from dying from accidents and things that caused him harm. And by doing so, it almost appears that he's quelling that, and he's quelling what's happened to him. Yet he's also being very selfish, and he's also being very much a hero hog. You can make the argument, as well as he's also doing it for himself very much, and he's not really doing it for the betterment of humankind. He's doing it so that he forgets and he feels better about what he's doing. And it raises this question of what is a hero in many ways, and even with Superman to some degree, I mean, we have to ask ourselves this question, is that, we have somebody who's not from Earth, and he's choosing to be in the spotlight and being praised by a society that is uplifting him. Why? Is it because he is so virtuous, or is it this idea that he just loves the praise and that he loves the attention that he's doing? And I think that's what I got out of this entire thing. And so to capture that, and to go back to the nurture versus nature thing, it's not the exact same emotion, but it's very similar with this character. And I think this idea of exploring it is super interesting. I think we see that, and we also see the effects of that over the course of 700, 800 days, and what that does to somebody. So I
Yeah,
don't know
you
what
nailed
your intention was exactly with that, but I think that's there. And I think there's so much more because the way I view this is that you could read it very much on the surface of
it.
just a hero slowly dwindling out
Hmm.
because he can't deal with the problem, or we can even dive further into all of these ideas and almost breaking tropes in the superhero community.
Hmm. Yeah, you nailed it. I tried to make sure that the story was clear, but also putting those underpinnings in there that would show the reader where I was coming from, which is everything you just said, and also giving them room to be able to put their own feelings into it. Also, giving them a chance to be able to, like I said, see it from their own perspective. So someone might think that he was being completely 100% selfless by just trying to save people, but then he's also, like you said, he's doing it not just for other people, and maybe he's not doing it for the other people. Maybe he's doing it to help himself also. So yeah, you nailed it. It's awesome.
And then also we get the self-medication component of it, which
Hmm.
sort of plays off of that too, in which that in many ways he seems like a drug addict
Yeah. Yep.
on this thing where the drug is that if he stops saving people, he's going to be reminded of him not being able to save his wife or his
Yeah.
girlfriend. I don't know if he had to choose between his girlfriend and his parents, which side he would choose, but
Hmm.
all three of them die in this exact same position, and they don't even die from a supervillain. They die from just an accident, and
Hmm.
it's almost like he can't cope with it, and his superpowers are granting him and are like the fix
Hmm.
in many ways for him to have that. And that's what I also got out of this, where it's almost like he's a junkie, and every time he saves somebody, it's a high, and it's really interesting because I feel like this, if you read enough superhero stuff, you now say, why do superheroes do what they do?
Hmm.
And it goes back to what I was even speaking about before, where it's that like high and that junkie addict,
Hmm.
where it's almost like a hit of a drug. And so I just think it's super interesting. It's distracting him from the death because he doesn't really he has a brief grieving moment. And I
Hmm.
don't know, we don't see much more of him grieving. You just see him immediately go into action. And over the course of like 800 days, save almost multiple people a day.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
like every time he does that, it sort of delays that he has to grieve even further.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really interesting way because it's a way to deal with death and doesn't seem normal. But I think everybody, when they read it, they're like, oh, I get that.
Yeah. If he stops, he'll have to think about it.
So, and
Yeah.
so I just think it's super interesting because I think that this really examines what's under the core and
Yeah.
examines things as superheroes and points out other components of superheroes and things that they deal with. And I think that when we look at Batman, we look at Superman, we look at even Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America, we don't think about the psychological stress they're under. We don't think about the psychological elements. We don't even think about them as humans.
Yeah.
In many ways, and we don't even think about how we feel. I mean, people watch the Avengers, and I don't think anybody says, "Oh man, Iron Man must be feeling something like this right now." Instead,
Yeah.
we say, "Oh man, they got to beat up that bad guy over there."
Hmm.
Yet, I mean, maybe in Endgame we see a little bit more of that
Yeah.
for the first time in the MCU, but
Mhm.
prior to that, we didn't see much. So I really like this entire concept and how it's kind of just breaking it down very, very significantly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I love thinking about movies and characters and TV shows, and we were just talking about it today, actually. And it doesn't have anything to do with I Won't Stop, but we were my wife and I took my daughter ice skating, and we were listening to the Frozen soundtrack for the 4 billionth time, and we were talking about Anna and how Anna was stuck in that castle. I don't know if you've ever seen Frozen or if anything like that, but she and I thought, what are the psychological ramifications for Anna that has to, for no fault by no fault of her own, is stuck in that castle for years and years and years with nobody to talk to except for paintings. So it's the same idea with Spiral. The really doing a deeper dive into the psychological ramifications about what these characters would go through if they were real people, if this was real life, and how they would deal with the trauma especially a big one that Spiral has to go through, how they would deal with that trauma, and who's to say they would deal with it well? Who's to say any human would deal with it well? So that's really one of the things that I was really looking for, and you nailed it. I really appreciate all those comments about I won't stop, because it kind of shows that or gives me the understand, that I know that I communicated those ideas successfully. So that's awesome. Thank you.
And then the other thing, and I'm not going to spoil where it goes, but I think people know, obviously this is being pushed too far as a hero, and we slowly see it, and we even see it from, day 591 to day like 800, or give or take. I'm not exactly sure the exact date it ends, but somewhere around there, where we see the way he's speaking to his fellow, Justice League type members, and how he's much shorter with them, and how he's much more firm. And then obviously he makes a decision that has some serious consequences. And that decision has been made somewhat by superheroes before, but it's still there. And it's the entire build up to where this is. So what is that like, to show that consequence of what it means not to, stop, and then eventually get to the point where you cross the line? Because everybody's been so pushed before that you do something that is somewhat irreversible. Yeah. Whether it's you break a dish or something more severe, everybody's been there. And well, that's kind of where this comic ends up to some degree.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Spiral definitely. He definitely, and I wanted to portray it to be kind of a non-conscious decision. He has, like I said, he's wound himself down to a level where he's really just working on instinct on some level. So that idea of his thought process being manipulated or being deteriorated because of his physical and mental state definitely takes a toll that it jeopardizes his hero status.
And also, just to throw something in there, also his instinct, though, and his natural instinct is to protect people. So just to throw a wrench in there, and to make this even more complicated, because I want people to wind up picking this thing up, is that on pure instinct, he has an element of good in him, and that is his intention, and something else happens instead. Yeah. And so I'm not going to tell what happens, but obviously it's very interesting to have that entire discussion. And who's to say that maybe if he was more rested in the situation, he would have acted very differently, and a different outcome would have happened. And so super, super interesting.
Awesome.
Just on the philosophical level of the last 4 pages, massively probably going to be broken down in unique ways.
Awesome.
And so now to even back out of this, and I don't want to ruin too much, because if we keep going, we're going to ruin what happens. I know we're going to do it because I want to see it in it, and I'm going to. That's the problem. So when is this actually available? Because I think that's something that I don't think it's out yet.
I Won't Stop is out. Yeah, I Won't Stop is out. It came out in October. So the very end of October, I was trucking really hard. Issue 13 of The Offspring came out in the end of August. So I started working on I Won't Stop, and it came out. Boy, I was trying hard to get it out before Halloween, and I made it. So it came out in October. So it's ready to go. So again, you can find a link to be able to buy digital and print on our website, correctanacomics.com.
And then so you can go get that. If this interests you, please go get that. And then the other one, and this is a little bit lighter, I think. It's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more peaceful, I want to say. It's got a little bit more of an adventure, realm to it. It's probably less psychological. I think it's a safe assessment. And this is Will Aliens Do My Homework? And so we have a teacher who is sort of shows up late. I don't think she's a bad teacher. She's not the most punctual, but pretty much aliens shoot up a school, and then her class with 11 fourth graders pretty much have to get out of school and run, and they don't really know what's going on, and that's the entire adventure, and they're trying to deal with an alien invasion and sort of survive it. But we don't really see much aliens necessarily in this entire book, which is kind of a nice take on it, because it's really about this teacher and her students. And so what was the inspiration for this? Where did this idea come from? Because obviously everybody's got an alien story in them.
Sure.
And this is somewhat of a different take than what other people go. I mean, Marvel's doing Aliens versus Predators, essentially. You know, they're Marvel covers right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it does have a little twist, but as it came out of me being a teacher, I was walking through the classroom after instruction, and the kids were doing all the things they needed to do, and I thought in my brain, what would happen if the school were attacked by aliens right now? How would I handle that with all these third, whatever class I had, third, fourth, or fourth to second graders, whatever class it was, and I kind of laughed to myself. I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool to see this unlikely hero type character, who's a teacher, who's not a superhero or not, any kind of hero at all. They're just a normal person. So quite honestly, by the end of the day, I had it written out. I had it outlined. So as I'm teaching, I'm writing down little plot points of this story. And yeah, I don't really show the aliens much. I kind of went by the Jaws rule, that it's better to show them less than more. And I think the design that I've made for the aliens is really different, or something that you maybe haven't seen before in those alien type things. And it really is about the interactions between this teacher and her students, and how she deals with the beginning of her day. You talked about it being she's late for work. So the beginning of the story is, it's kind of, oh boy, she's like, how could my day get any worse? And then she gets reprimanded by her boss. She gets splashed with water, and then the snowstorm happening. Her car didn't start. She has to discipline these kids who aren't listening to directions. And then she's like, oh my gosh, this day is a nightmare. And then aliens attack. So I think it's a really different kind of story. I think you're right. It's more of lighthearted. It's more of a fun character development for me as a teacher, to be able to see this kind of story where you have one adult taking care of all these kids and really risking her life for these children, which any teacher would do in that situation.
And also, I find that it's very much that we have a character who is not rising to the occasion of something, and then is forced into a situation where they are. And that's a great story. And it's always nice when we have situations that force people to rise to a particular situation and rise above it. And I think that that's a really nice touch in this entire story. And it's nice because as a reader, everybody's been in a situation, whether it's big or small, where they've risen past an occasion and have risen to meet a circumstance. And I think it's very relatable in this book. And I think people, when they pick it up, they're like, oh, I get that. I can understand the feeling that Miss Jackson, who's the teacher, has, and what she's doing and what she's leading. And, and also if you have kids, I mean, obviously I don't have kids yet, but also, if you have kids and you're like, oh man, I hope a teacher would do that for my kids too. Like, that's the thing that gets into the back of your head. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's very much the idea also that we make decisions in our lives. And some of those decisions are tough. Some of those decisions are wrong. Some of those decisions, whatever it is. But as long as you end up in a place where where you've learned from those decisions, whether they were good or bad or unchangeable, she has to make decisions that would, for any person, after the fact, affect them mentally. And she has to make those decisions with these 11 fourth graders, to where we say, we just have to keep moving. We don't worry about that. We just have to keep moving. And I think one of the fun things for me about writing this book was that if you've ever been in a group of any elementary students, whether it's kindergarten to fifth grade, sixth grade, whatever it is, half of your day is hearing just random thoughts from the children that are just kind of said out loud. Mr. Whalen, I got a new dog. Mr. Whalen, my dad is a farmer. Mr. Whalen, my grandma bought a house, just like things like that. And part of the fun thing for me, and to make this as realistic, and if any teacher reads it, they would laugh at all these things, is that this teacher, while dealing with an alien invasion, is still dealing with the children who are still children, who don't really quite understand what's going on, and still teaching, and still in some cases disciplining, and still giving them the ability to be able to do better and to rise above the situation.
Yeah, there's two things I want to talk about now because that's super interesting. I think that one of the things you mentioned is that she keeps saying, "Oh, we have to keep moving on. I know you're cold." And then one of the kids asked, "What about those kids over there in the classroom?" And it's a really harrowing moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a dark moment when she's like, "Oh no, we have to keep moving on," knowing. And I mean, maybe not directly knowing, but on a subconscious level, I think the kids also got it to some degree that, wait a second, those kids aren't moving out of their classroom and we are.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to them? And so we have to keep moving on, and how she's making a very, very difficult choice.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't think people understand how harrowing that is. And how dark that is, and how messed up that is to some degree. And so it's really a nice touch, because we have this adventure stuff, and you talk about this real thing and all these random thoughts and how these kids saying I'm cold and there's all that stuff. But then we have that moment, I think a bunch of the kids got it. And it's very adult. So what was, I don't know even if when you wrote it, you knew how that was going to look, because that's sort of it almost seems like a perfect happy accident that just wrote itself.
It really did, actually. Yeah, it was. I knew it was something that I needed, because as a teacher in the building every day, I've been in circumstances where we were on lockdown, and
I'm sure a kid has mentioned something where some kid got it. Maybe not everybody's gotten it, but somebody got it in the room of how bad or how dangerous the situation could be.
Yeah. And I've been in situations where we had to go into lockdown, and we're huddling in a corner, crisscross applesauce, and you're trying to whisper to them and make sure they're calm, and make sure you look calm, and make sure that, while you're hearing commotion out in the hallway, nothing like gunshots fired or anything, but still situations where there's scary things happening in the hallway, and you look at one of the children and they are close to tears, so they know something's going on. That could be potentially dangerous. So it's that idea of me not knowing what's going on, them not knowing what's going on, and me trying to not look like I'm concerned about don't worry, guys, everything's going to be fine. Nobody can get in here. Everything's fine. Why don't we, I usually have, in the place where we hunker down, what I do is I have a sheet of sign language, American Sign Language, the alphabet. So we will work on American Sign Language. So I'll say, okay, guys, we're going to work on our sign language right now while we're doing this, which doesn't have to do anything to do with what I teach. It's just a way to be able to make sure they're not talking while the situation is going in. So I've been in those situations where a teacher is hunkered down in hopefully their safe place, and not knowing what's going on. But for Miss Jackson to be able to see those students in another classroom across the quad, and be able to assess pretty quickly what could happen, and be able to, and have to make that decision of, we just have to keep moving forward. We can't save everybody. We can't try to get them out. We've got to get us out. And it was something that came in fairly quickly in the script. And I think, like I said, I think it worked out really well. I think it showed in a really quick moment that decision making process that teacher had to make, and I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, and I also think that her almost commanding, saying, "Hey, we're all now going to run on the count of 3," and how she's sort of leading and just keep running into the woods because she doesn't know what's happening. She doesn't know that aliens shot up, the school. I mean, maybe she knows some mystical snail-like ship shot up, but they don't know what exactly it is. And
Yeah.
then she's like, well, we have to keep on going into the woods. And then there's a street across there. And on the count of three, and she's like trying to get her entire class together, and just that entire circumstance. And obviously, we got all the thinking random things, not exactly cooperating perfectly. And so
Yeah, yeah. That's you just nail teacher. You nail teaching. Kids not always cooperating perfectly.
I,
And one of the great things I was able to put in too was my experience with a teacher was as they move from each place to place, she's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Gotcha. I've got all of you. Okay. And that's something that as a teacher, any teacher would recognize what, the constant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, go to the next place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Go to the next place to be able to make sure they're corralled and safe and doing what they need to do. In a real, like in a fire drill, kids are all over the place. In a real situation that I found so far as my 13 years as a teacher, in real situations, kids get the job done. They understand when it's real and when it's not real. And when it's real, they usually get the job done. And that's again something I wanted to show, but still showing that aspect of kids just blowing out whatever's on their mind without any hesitation.
yeah, and I think it's great, and I didn't even pick up on that. There's so much going on in this entire comic, so I'm the first person to say I didn't pick up on that. But I do want to talk about the aliens because I think they're great. So they're running into the woods. Sort of going to ruin a little bit of it, but not too much. And they're running into the woods, and then we see the aliens, and they look like lobstermen. Like it's like the trope. I'm not trying to beat you up on it.
Yeah, no.
That's
what I was going for. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I just started laughing
Awesome.
when I was reading it because here I am, and I'm thinking they're gonna be like something else, and then I see these lobsterman creatures, and clearly they don't look too friendly. And here I thought that there's going to be like an inside joke, but obviously they're not very friendly. So where did that idea come from? Because this is the first time we're seeing them. This is mostly the only time we see them throughout this thing. This is towards the back of the book also. Yeah. And then we have lobstermen, and there's tropes on that. And I just thought it was very funny. I thought it was interesting. And then I also just, and then you see their ships, and you're like, oh, it's the snail ships, and so it all makes sense. So not to ruin the surprise here for anybody who's interested, but obviously, what made you choose that version? Because there's like a million ways to have gone, and this is just sort of funny.
Yeah. Like you said at the beginning, it's a little more lighthearted than I Won't Stop or Shady Lady. So I wanted the aliens to be formidable. Scary on some level, but not predator scary, not like big hulking masses of aggression scary. So I wanted something that would invoke fear, especially in little kids, but not be as aggressive looking as some of the other aliens you might find in this kind of story. And quite honestly, being at the beach, my family goes to the beach, at least 2 or 3 times a year, and the little ghost crabs are always running around. And when kids see them, they freak out. When some adults see them, they freak out. And I thought that sounds pretty good to me. Let's come up with something with that idea. It gave me an opportunity to be able to find little things to be able to talk about how we talk about stuff that's different. One example is, without giving anything away, there's at one point a military people that are involved, and one of the guys in charge calls the aliens sidewalkers. So it's been a half an hour since this tragedy happened, and there's already disparaging nicknames for these aliens, and clearly they're aggressive. Clearly they did not come in peace. But it's that idea that that we've already diminished this group of aliens by calling them this little frivolous little nickname about something that we recognize in animals that are similar to what we have here on Earth. So I wanted something I wanted something that would look intimidating and scary to maybe maybe a kid, I think if most adults would see that, they'd freak out also. But I didn't want something that was um, so over the top and so scary
Yeah.
that it wouldn't be believable that these kids would be able to, um, without giving anything away, do the things they do. How
I
about that?
think that also I think that if a 9-year-old read this, it
Hmm.
would be a little scary, but I
Hmm.
also think it wouldn't terrify them that they
Yeah.
would have nightmares. You
Yes.
know, when we talk about I won't stop, I don't view that for a 9-year-old.
Hmm.
And because there's more psychology there's a lot more going on, even
Yeah.
though there's no cursing in either one of these things for the most part. I don't think there's any cursing.
Yeah.
It's not, they're different audiences, and
Hmm.
they definitely have a different element. Like, I think a 9-year-old can read Will Aliens Do My Homework
Hmm.
versus saying, if I think a 9-year-old reading I Won't Stop, my 9-year-old will get the surface part of it, but
Yeah.
they won't fully understand everything else that's in there.
Exactly.
I think a 15-year-old will get more of I Won't Stop, or even a
Yeah.
13-year-old will. And I
Yeah.
even think like a 13-year-old will be maybe, oh snap, like this is like they can get the gravity of the situation. Like I think a 9-year-old kid reading Will I Do My Homework will get the gravity of the situation.
Hmm.
And I think they can, but I also think they're not going to wake up and say, "Oh my God, I love Sponsor," like that. I don't think they're going
Yeah.
to go like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I view this, and I
Yeah.
think it's nice, and I think that this is really, I like both of these because to just even compliment you further, because that's what I'm doing, and I'm kissing ass right now. But one of the things is that one of these is obviously they're aimed at different audiences,
Hmm.
and I think it's really a good skill when writers can write for like a 15-year-old or a 13, 15-year-old range,
Hmm.
and also write for like a 9-year-old range, and have that differentiating factor. And I think that that's something that we don't see very often. We see a lot of people writing for certain genres, and then they stick in certain genres,
Hmm.
or they're a nonfiction writer and they can't write fiction, or they're a fiction writer and they only write like suspense fiction mystery novels.
Hmm.
And so I like that a lot about both of these, and especially in comparison to each other,
Yeah.
sort of cool. So I just want
Well,
to
thank you.
compliment you. Well,
Thank you very
something
much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I try to, make sure that all the books I read, I don't really use language much. If I do, it's for a reason. I don't really use, most of my books aren't overly violent. If they are, it's for a reason. And like The Offspring has some stuff in it. There's some violence.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever used any real language in there,
You
like the really big bad boys,
you
kind of
used a
thing.
few curses, but
Little bit
sparing.
here and there. Yeah, I see. I don't want to have that all throughout my book because I think it detracts from the story, from the characters, and it makes them less. It makes them less, I think, to have too much language, to have too much overly over the top violence. And I really do love every kind of genre that there is. And one of the reasons that I started this one shot series, these series of one shots, was to work in those and to tell stories in these different genres. The next one after we finish Offspring 14, which hopefully comes out at the end of this month, I hope. There's a story that I did with a buddy of mine who is a big horror guy, and I'm a big fan of like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, those kind of stories, those kind of movies. So the next one's going to be more of like a slasher thriller horror type thing. So there's probably going to be a mature audience sticker on that one, but it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be called the Sock Hop Killer, and it's got a lot of really fun, different things that I've never seen in a slasher type movie. And I think it's going to be really fun. I'm starting that. I'm hoping by the end of January, I'm going to start that one and get that out. I'm hoping by spring to be able to get that one out also. So just going to continue. I've got a million stories. I'm going to try to get them out quickly, but quality to be able to just keep entertaining people.
And so I do want to mention one more thing about talk to talk about, will aliens do my homework? And well, that's the punchline. And I don't know if you want to disclose that
Let's
entire.
save it. Let's save it. Let's save it. Yeah.
Let's just say that there is a great punchline at the end that really brings things full circle, and
Mhm.
you get the entire thing, and it's really brilliant. So I do want to bring that up, and that's what I think also makes this entire thing a lot lighter, is that we get that punchline. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying the comic's a joke. I want to make that clear, but it
Yeah.
definitely has the punchline. So
Yeah.
there you.
Yeah. It ends in a very very elementary school class way. Like I said, any teachers who would ever read this, they would get they would see it on a bigger level. If somebody wasn't a teacher, they'd still get it. They'd still understand it, but it's that idea again that kids have no filter. There's no filter in children usually, I found. So the way the book, um that punchline at the end, I think if as a teacher, it makes me laugh every time. And I wrote it, which is bad, but but I think that really, anybody who has kids would say, "Oh yeah, okay, all right, I get what's going on with this guy."
I was a camp counselor for about 4 years.
So you then you know.
And I had a huddle of 10. And let's just say that some of the things
Yeah.
they said, I mean, it's comedy gold, for lack of a better word. You put that and add a few more words into it, and you'll be perfect for a while. And there's a good chance my former boss or bosses might be seeing this part of the interview, and they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're going to leave it at that.
Okay.
For those who's ever been a teacher, camp counselor, if you are a parent,
you've ever worked with kids in any way or have kids, you'll get it.
and so before we start giving you a chance to promote things and talk about what's coming out, and you mentioned one thing so far, I do want to talk about COVID, because we did speak about COVID last time, and things have changed, and things also haven't changed in many ways. And I think it's pretty interesting where things have gone. I don't know how many cons you do. I forgot, but I know that you mentioned it the last time. And I think it's safe to say that we're not seeing conventions for at least 6 months, if not longer. We're not going to be seeing big ones. I don't think San Diego Comic-Con is going to happen in July. I don't think New York Comic-Con is going to happen. And I think you're on the East Coast. I think you're in New York, upstate New York. So obviously that's probably closer to your backyard. I'm in Connecticut, which is closer to my backyard. So I think it's a relatively safe argument to say that big cons aren't coming, and even anything major is not coming anyway till the summer, or any small thing is not coming till the summer. So I'm curious where you think things are going with conventions, given how things right now in America, at the very least, are sort of getting worse.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's definitely where I am. And I think there's a lot of areas like this throughout the United States that the cases are definitely spiking. They're worse probably at the end of 2020 than they were even in the middle of even in spring, even when fall hit. And it's probably because of the winter season. Everybody's kind of trapped inside a little bit more than they would be. But also holidays didn't help, and because I think it's because there are unfortunately a lot of people that aren't taking it as seriously as maybe they should. It's not about living in fear; it's about living in safety. It's about living to be with for each other. To be able to, if putting a mask over your face, is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life, then you're doing pretty good. I think so, and I really do think that, unfortunately. There's a large swath of people that aren't taking it very seriously, that are kind of affecting how we're having to deal with this right now. But that aside, I think that as far as cons go, one of the pros I've found, and I try to always find the positive, and especially any bad situation like this, is that even though conventions aren't happening, it's things like this that have grown immensely. Shows, YouTube, Facebook, podcasts, all that stuff. I've been able to meet so many great creators and podcasters and reviewers and people in the industry, at all levels of the industry, that I probably would not have met, would not have been able to sit down and have conversations like this with, if it wasn't for the pandemic. So for, I think, me and other creators, I can't speak for any other creators, but I think that if there's a pro out of it for the indie industry, for the indie comic book industry, it's that it really has given us a chance to be able to connect, more than what maybe we would have to begin with, because going to the conventions is amazing and it's the lifeblood for a lot of creators, a lot of indie creators. But you see, unless you're able to travel, around the United States and around the world, you're going to be kind of seeing the same people over and over and over again on some level. But this is a way to be able to connect with people in California, and I've met people in Ireland and England, and in different countries, Canada, all over the place, that I would not have been able to meet and become friends with, if it wasn't for this. So for me, as an indie creator, the idea that the big boys had to drop their pencils, that was one of the big things in the industry when all this happened. Is the big boys, Marvel, DC, they said, all right, everybody stop drawing. We're not moving forward. We don't know what's happening. But the indie creators were the exact opposite. Oh, this is the time to be able to use, to be able to get that book out, to be able to, start getting more eyes on this book that I've had out for a little bit, or to finally organize that Kickstarter, or to get on more podcasts to be able to get my name out. So for the indie industry in a tough situation, I think I've met so many great people that I never would have been able to meet. That's one of the positives in this situation. When conventions come back, I'm sure everybody will sigh, do a deep, big sigh of relief. And it will probably look different. Even, I think we'll probably still have a lot more of these, maybe even during conventions, to be able to connect with those people that maybe aren't going to be able to be there. So even if conventions are able to come back in a small way in the summer, I don't think they're going to look the same as what they did before. Similar aspects, always selling cool stuff, toys and comics and all that. But I think there's going to be that new idea of we can do a lot of stuff virtually, so that people who aren't here can see and experience all these great creators, all these great collectors and toys and books and everything. So I think that's something that I'm really super excited about when conventions come back. It has given me a chance to be able to regroup, to be able to get my numbers of books that I sell and everything, kind of up, so I can be ready when the conventions come back. And I think a lot of indie creators in my same position, where they're just kind of stockpiling those books and trying to make sure they have enough inventory to be able to, when we can start conventions, to be able to be ready to go. Be ready to go with bells on and get there and continue seeing people face to face.
So there's a lot to talk about right there. So my first question actually is that, because you mentioned this, and obviously I'm part of this. Last year, for those who don't know, I did 90 of them between a bunch of cosplayers, indie creators, and indie wrestlers. And so I did a lot of work last year in 9 months, and I'm planning to do a lot more this year because I'm seeing the writing on the wall. But I'm also curious because I think even prior to this, a lot of stuff was almost sound bidding, where there wasn't this long-form conversation between creators and people having discussions and people, talking to one another in this idea of actually breaking down what you've done. It's been maybe a 10-minute bit at a con at the most. And now people can get a real sense of, okay, what are we talking about when we're spending 20 minutes talking about a concept or a book, or The Offspring, as we did in the last interview. We spoke about it, I think, for 20, 22 minutes. And so I think that's, I'm curious how you feel about that, because it seems to me people want more long-form content in indie side, and I think that's something that people are very excited. I think Joe Rogan proved that, and then I think it's just been reaffirmed in COVID. So I don't know how you feel about that. And then my second thing is that you say you're gearing up and you're getting your inventory back up, and do you think that when things come back, because they're going to come back, it's a when, not an if?
Yeah.
And I think things are going to be different at cons, just collectively, and how limitation of people, spaced out, and other things, and even how things are set up.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's going to be like a real floodgate of people starving for content and people saying, "Hey, I want everything at this con because I've been so deprived of it," and it's going to be like the kid who hasn't been to a candy store and just spent like 3 years in prison and hasn't had candy, like like that. That's like the analogy I use because and it's going to be in that circumstance type of thing.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that people are like overly super excited when they come back. I think you're absolutely right. I think it'll be so good to get out that maybe people that go to 1 or 2 cons a year would maybe go to 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 just because we haven't been able to do it all year. So I hope that the idea that we've been stuck inside for so long that there would be an influx of more people who maybe watched something or read something that they hadn't seen before, and maybe pique their interest about going to a convention to be able to see that stuff, see more of that thing that they hadn't seen before because they were kind of stuck inside. So I hope so. I hope that more people want to come and have that interpersonal communication with creators, with people who sell toys, people who whatever it is, to be able to maybe dig a little deeper into those aspects of indie creators and just comic book conventions by themselves. And I think that as an indie creator, one of the strengths that any indie creator could have is the gift of gab, right? To be able to hold a conversation and to be able to keep that conversation going for longer than maybe the average person would be able to keep a conversation going, continuing to ask those questions of the reader, of the potential buyer of your comic books, to keep them at your booth, to keep them interested, to talk about things that they're interested in, to be able to hope that that they decide that they want to give your book a try also, to be able to say that they like the creator enough to be able to support them with a $5 comic book that they might not have done before. If it's, "Hi, how are you? If you see anything you like, let me know." And actually having a conversation with them. So I think that's something that more creators are, most creators are aware of it. I think some struggle with it, I think, which is okay. Not everybody has to give a 40-minute speech about comic books every time they go to a convention. But I think it's one of those things that people will really be looking for when they come to conventions, when this is all over, having that more interpersonal communication and being able to hold your eyesight, and look at each other in the eyes and talk about things that are super cool.
Yeah, and I think that that's also something that's sort of coming out of all of this too, is that I think a lot more creators, and I was just speaking with my mom about it, and I was just doing some indie wrestlers, and a few of them never had an interview before, and in many ways it's training for them to get good at this. And I think that's something that sort of last year, I think, proved that if you never did an interview and you're an indie creator, you need to be doing like 100 of them. And not only for marketing, but you need to learn how to speak. And I'm not saying that obviously right now we're live and a bunch of people are watching it, but one of the things, and we're just one-on-one, but obviously it's a bigger audience. But I think that's something that COVID has changed, where I think we're now going to see a lot more people who are quote unquote indie comic creators are really indie comic market creators. And I think that's something that has to be thrown out there. And I think it's the same thing in any sector. I am now not just an interviewer, I am a marketer. And I'm marketing myself, and I actively push forth heavy on social media. And so I think that's something that COVID has sort of pushed out and created and forced, where you have to be a marketer, almost simultaneously as a creator. And they're not the same, but they are right next to each other, and they are both equally important. And I think that's something that COVID has forced and created, and I think it's a good thing. I really think it's a good thing, and I think it's going to change the game tremendously. And so I don't know how you feel about that, because I think that's something that the last 9 months have proven. And I think ultimately, obviously, I wish it didn't have to come at the expense of what COVID's done. But I think in the long run, in the next 20 years, this is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you come out of this and haven't learned something new, or read more books, or learned a new skill, or talk to more people that maybe you don't get a chance to talk to
Not like Jordan
in a
Belfort.
year. Yeah,
Sounds like
yeah,
Jordan Belfort.
yeah.
Jordan Belfort, The Wolf of Wall Street, just so
Mhm.
everybody understands. It's a great, I'm going to find it. I'm going to put it under this
Yeah.
video actually on Facebook for all those who want it. He
Mhm.
gave a speech at the beginning of COVID,
Mhm.
and he said, hey, we're all on lockdown. And I'm paraphrasing it. He said, if you don't come out of this staying in shape, reading more books, learning a skill you wanted to learn, or better yet, let's say you wanted to learn how to speak French, and you
Yeah.
have no use for the language of French and of
Mhm.
France, and you just said, hey, I want to know how to speak French.
There you go.
This legitimately, March was the time to do it. Now,
Mhm.
does that mean you should not do it now? Of course not. You're 9 months late. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that means you have to do something. And so with indie comic creators and everything, that's why I started last year, because I'm like, oh, great, I got to learn a skill because COVID is going to change the game.
Mhm.
And so he gave this amazing 25-minute speech, I think. And he was basically saying that you got to set goals and that you got to learn a new skill. And that if we're on lockdown and you don't come out of this learning skill, you just wasted your time. And that might sound harsh to people, but it's meant to be, because if you legitimately for the last 9 months sat around on your ass and did nothing, and you're writing an indie comic, you didn't learn how to market yourself, you didn't get on podcasts, and look, you don't have to get on 10,000 of them. But if you need to get on one a week, or at least, let's say you're an introvert, at least 2 a month. And if you didn't do that, then you seriously wasted the last 9 months.
Yeah, we have a lot of consumers in our culture when we need more creators. And I think that's one of the things that maybe COVID, again, another pro that came out of it, that a lot of people, maybe the first couple weeks sat and rewatched Star Wars for the 577th time and
that's
said,
not bad. It's
that's
important.
nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Watch those. Those are the things that get your creative juices going, right? That whatever's going to inspire you. But then you look at that wall and go, that wall needs to be re-drywalled. Let me tear it down and put it back up. Even that kind of stuff to be able
That's
to,
great.
to be able
That's
to
progress.
better yourself. Yeah, to be able to keep moving forward, not just standing still. And I think that's
If
another pro from COVID.
I'll give somebody a very basic position. If your goal was to repaint your house by yourself and it needed to be repainted, and that in a normal environment you couldn't do that, and it would have taken you would have had to do it in the summer, or you had like 2.5 weeks to do it, and that's progress. That's not that Jordan Belfort wouldn't criticize you for that, because you accomplished something that you wouldn't have done previously, and you had the time to do it. And it's not a money issue per se. That's not what we're talking about. What the entire thing is that, or if you need to repaint your house, or repaint walls, that's what we're talking about. Where if you fixed and got your house up in order and repaired things, as you repaired your house and you finally had time, that's progress. And I think that's something that COVID and the indie community, in my opinion, has done. Because I've seen more now indie creators start being on more podcasts, as well as start having their own shows, and that's great. And while you're my competition, you're not my competition at the same time.
Yeah. There's room for everybody. There's room for everybody.
And so on that note, and I think we just beat this with like hammer a few times.
Go do something. Yeah, go read a book. That's the bottom line. Go read a book. If you haven't read a book in 10 years, go pick up any genre. It doesn't matter. Read it. You can go to correcthandedcomics.com and you can read our Western novel, The Last Ride to Tyburn.
Yeah, speaking about that, let's just get into shameless self-promotion right now.
Sure.
So what do you have to promote? Like,
yeah, so you can find me at correcthandedcomics.com, and links to all of our books on Facebook at Correct Handed Comics. We have issue 14 of The Offspring coming out at the end of this month. Fingers crossed that nothing weird happens. We can get it out at the end of this month. We have, like I said, multiple one-shots, 100-plus page graphic novels, 4-issue miniseries, a novel. If you like Westerns, The Last Ride to Tyburn is a fun Western. I think it's got a great twist ending that'll take people by surprise. And our ongoing series, The Offspring, I think there's something for everybody there, and I think it's just going to continue to grow with the content that I want to create in the next year. And I'm hoping to be able to by the time I'm done, hit every genre a whole bunch of times. So if there's something that you like, Correct Handed Comics probably has something for you on those websites. And if you on the website, and if you like them, find us on Facebook, Facebook, and like and share and comment and all that kind of stuff, and tell people that you liked it. If you have questions about the story, if there was something that you wasn't quite sure about, ask me. I'll answer it. I love feedback. I love hearing people's ideas and questions about anything and everything. So if you ever read something and you're like, why did this character do that? Oh, well, we'll be able to have a conversation. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, so I spent the first 15 minutes talking about it, and I spoke about very narrowly and only like 4 things. So obviously there's a lot more stuff. And obviously we didn't get into all of it. And if we were going to, we would be here for the next 3 hours. So I could tell you, I could have done it, guys. I could have done it. I chose not to because I want to get into the new stuff. But you can go and find my first interview. And we definitely dealt with more of the older stuff. And I'm sure at some point we're going to have a third interview, and we're going to deal with some of more newer stuff going forward, because that's just how we roll. And so obviously you're on Facebook. Are you on Instagram?
Instagram, yes. Correct_handed.
And then do you have a Twitter account?
Twitter, same thing. Correct_handed.
And then obviously the website is
correcthandedcomics.com.
So pretty much if you type in Correct Handed Comics on Google, it's going to bring you to something. And then I'm going to take a leap of faith here. But more or less, if you go to any of these social media sites, they're going to lead to the others, whether directly or indirectly. So if you find one, you're going to find it all.
Yes.
Just to put it nicely, and I've been saying it with every single interview. I said it earlier today with my first interview that I did today. I'm going to say it again. You got to support indie comics. You got to support indie people. This isn't – it's quite simple, actually, because – when you support indie people, you're supporting direct creators, you're supporting people, as you see, David's doing all this stuff, and it's really amazing work, and it's fantastic, and there's something for everybody in here. If you like, horror, monsters, and more of the psychological stuff, there's something there. If you just want, kind of a crazy superhero story that's not a superhero story, but about that kid that's going to become a superhero inside his mother, there's that. Obviously, The Offspring is going in the Offspring's direction. And why don't you go get a job? And that's all I can say about that before I get sued. And luckily, I'm Jewish, so we're going to end there. See, I can make that joke. Everybody. But in all seriousness, when you support indie, because indie is not DC, they're not Marvel, there's not big money backing, and all the money that goes supports more and more projects. And if you like what you see, you have to support it with money. And let's say that you're in a situation where you don't have money and that you're taking care of your family, you're taking care of yourself, you're making sure you're good first. And that's something that I encourage extremely well, is to take care of you first. Make sure your 4 walls are good. Make sure your family's good. Make sure there's food, water, electricity, internet on in your house. Before you go out and buy any comics, that's what you have to do first. And then if you're in that situation where you're securing that up, you can still follow on social media. And obviously we mentioned all the social media, and that's something that you have to do as well. And it's just as important, because if you follow on Facebook, it's a like. Facebook's free, guys. Instagram's free. Twitter's free. Going on a website is free. And liking something, tweeting somebody, following, retweeting, commenting, giving it a heart, checking it out, commenting, saying, oh, great story. Oh, this looks awesome. It goes a long way. And so there's no excuse anymore for either not supporting economically if you have the money and you like what you see. And if you don't, social media is free and you have to support that way. And so at this point in society, you have to support, and you have 2 options, and one of those options is free. And if you don't, you're sort of freeloading. So I'm calling you out, everybody. And that's what it is that if the option is free and you don't support, you're freeloading, and that's what you want. So don't be a freeloader, be a visionary, and go like one of David Whalen's social media pages at Correct Handed Comics. Google it and like one of those pages. And so I think I'm going to give you the final word on that.
Yeah, thank you. Everything you just said, and especially now, money isn't everything. A like and a share, because you never know who's going to see it. You never know who's going to be able to see that, to be able to continue moving it forward, to be able to get more eyes on it. A like and a share costs nothing.
It's free. It's legitimately free.
Exactly.
In fact, you will gain something, and you will feel good inside.
You'll be a better person for it.
By doing this, you will gain things.
You'll be the hero.
Be the hero you want to be.
The hero of indie comics. Yep.
And so on that note, I think I'm gonna not top myself on that one. I think that's the height of this entire interview is like every social media page of Correct Handed Comics. Be the hero you want to be is how we're gonna end this.
Awesome. Love it.